Welcome back to the show where your someday starts here. Today, we're going to talk about why we don't post our daughter on social media and really dive into that deep question. But first, let's just talk about how we got here. Physically here, we were in France not too long ago, and we had to take a pretty big journey to get here. So, what did we do? What was this whole journey?
It took us about 18 hours. I think it was a hefty travel day because typically there is a direct flight from Newark to Nice to the French Riviera, the Meatball Riviera to the French Riviera, and which is why we chose Nice, one of the reasons, an easy connection to the New York City area. However, that flight ends in the fall because it's seasonal. So it was April to October, I believe, and it is now November. So we had to connect with a toddler.
Which is never fun.
No. But the flight was actually pretty fun once we got to our connection.
We had to get up at like 3 a.m. and Scotland was just chipper as a jaybird, ready to go.
She was great.
And when she napped at some point. I'm trying to remember when she napped, but
just on the big flight. So we flew from Nice to Paris to Newark, and we got to sit in the coolest seats. We got to fly on Air France's business class because we transferred Chase points, credit card points, to Air France's mileage program called Flying Blue, and we booked their new A350 business class seats.
When you transferred the points, though, how'd you do it through the portal, like through Chase's? Because some people ask these questions.
Yes. So I went on to the Chase travel portal, and they have a transfer to airline partners or transfer to partners section. And sometimes there's a bonus when you transfer to certain partners. Unfortunately, we didn't have a bonus at the time, but we were just able to transfer our points, our credit card points, over to Flying Blue. And then when you do that, you can fly on Air France or KLM.
But the risk is
once
you move them to Air France, you're stuck.
Yes, you can't move them out.
So you have to be sure that you have a flight, and that's what you had a flight ready. Like you looked at how many it was going to cost, how many points, and then you just move that amount, right?
Exactly. And you can also call the airline to call Flying Blue to hold the flights.
Really?
Yes.
You can call them and say, hey, I'm going to transfer points. Can you hold this flight for me? And they'll do that for what, like a day?
Oh, I don't know the actual limitation on the hours.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we flew this amazing flight. I think it was probably like one of the best business classes we've flown. The food, the seats, just the service, it was spectacular.
I want to call out, I really wanted to talk about this flight because I've never seen Scott so enthusiastic about food on an airplane ever in my life. He was so excited. When I looked over, we had these little pods and they even had doors that closed. And I feel like you popped open the pod door and you were like, this was the best meal I've had in France.
Well, some of it was like, my expectation was like, okay, it's just going to be a meal, like nothing special. And it was pork. I'm like, okay, whatever, pork. I don't know what they did. It was spectacular. It was like soft. And then they're like, do you want mustard? I'm like, sure, give me everything. And it was just this amalgamation of like flavors that was just so perfect.
Whatever the chef recommends, sir.
Yes.
And they even recommended a wine for you. You initially ordered one wine and they were like, no.
That was the most French thing ever, is the flight attendant. I was like, I'll take I forget whichever red. And he goes, no. He goes, it's good, but this one's so much better. I'm like, oh, sure, whatever. And that's a very French thing, to be a polite way to be like, you made the wrong decision, but let me help you out.
Yeah, I respect that. I really respect that wholeheartedly. But the aircraft was incredible. The service was amazing. It was a beautiful flight.
But I was just remembering how Scotland fell asleep. This was the first time I've ever seen a toddler go from, she was yelling, but not like, she was toddler argument basically. And I was trying to calm her down. I was sitting next to her and trying to create an environment for sleep. And she went from basically like screaming to her head turned sideways into my leg, and she didn't move again. I've never seen a kid go from frustrated screaming to just asleep, like kind of like out of a movie, but she did.
Don't worry, it wasn't really disruptive, honestly. And I'm not even saying that as the mom.
No, it wasn't loud.
It was so quick that
it was
she
just
was
it was like a whine. I should say it was a whine, not a scream.
Yeah,
it was a whine.
She's like, no, I don't want to, and then I'm asleep.
Zonk, and then out. And I just looked at you, and I'm like, I can't believe it. She's actually asleep right now. And so she slept, and she was good.
The baby whisperer. I'm sitting across from a baby whisperer.
But jet lag was tough. The first few days, oh my God, it was very tough coming back.
Because very early wake-ups.
While she would technically sleep until like maybe 4 a.m., she would be waking us up at like 1:30, 2:30, 3:30. So for the first few days, I think first day we were up at 2:30. Second day was like 3. The first day we were at the local coffee shop, like knocking on the door
when it opened.
when it
Yeah.
opened. But it's okay. We're good. We're settled in.
Yes, we're getting there. But let's get into the hot topic, right?
Yes. So if you follow us on social media, you might have noticed that over the years, at the beginning we were new parents, proud to show our new baby off, and then things shifted, and we've actively tried to really limit and not have her face shown on social media. And people ask us why. Some people are like, we want to see her, and it's kind of that's a heavy question, and we've thought a lot about it, and there's no like one simple reason. I mean, some of the main things are like, one, she doesn't have a say in it, and
Right.
stop me because I can ramble. Both of us could ramble on. Like, one, she doesn't have a say in it. Let's just highlight the bullet points, I guess.
She's a minor.
She's a minor.
Young. She doesn't have a say in it. We don't want to exploit her.
It lasts forever. We don't know what people are interested in with these photos. There are some creepy people out there. A lot of people are positive.
Safety is
There's
big.
safety.
Yeah.
Those are some of the big things.
And we don't want her to feel like she has to perform.
That was
She didn't sign up for this life. We did. And if she chooses it later on, when she understands the consequences and all of that goes along with it, which will take quite a mature brain to understand that. I don't want to shove a camera in her face and have her childhood have to be looked back on for everybody. That's not fair.
I found myself, even the few times we'd have, and I don't even know if this footage ever made it out, but like little things would happen, cute things. She'd say something funny, and then we'd be like, oh, say it again for the camera. Like, I found myself doing that, and I was like, this doesn't feel right.
Yeah, you don't want to be a stage mom.
Yeah, and that's exactly what was happening.
Yeah.
And even the smallest things. I'm like, what's the... And so I can understand how quickly parents can slide down that negative path.
It's well-intentioned is the thing. You love your child so much. Look at my baby. I love my baby. I want to share my baby with my friends. You're not thinking about all of the consequences and ramifications of that and how widespread it could be. You're just so in love and proud. But when you do start to think, and with everything with parenting, you have to lead with intention. What's the consequence? What does this mean? And what's the action I take and the consequence that happens? It can be scary then to have your child online, and we're in a public eye. And when you're in that public eye, let's think about the relationship you create with someone in that public eye. We do it all the time with TV, parasocial relationships with people on TV. You develop this relationship, or you think it's a relationship, and it's totally natural. It's not like a creepy thing. Learned it in university about this. So it's been going on for a long time. Then you have these reality stars, and that really like starts to blur that line of, wait, these are real people. This is how they maybe really act. I'm developing a relationship with them. Same thing happens.
Parasocial
relationship. And then that happens online with social media personalities. Okay, that's fine. That's natural. But when someone's developing that with a minor, that feels a little icky to me. And I think we have to recognize when something doesn't feel quite right in the gut. Like your body tells you when things are okay and are not okay. And it might be different for us versus someone else.
And if you're interested in some of the, like diving more into the effects of social media, a very good book that we've read and I recommend everything is called The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. It's like Haidt. Great book. And basically he started this as like a research project that was he thought it was a bigger societal thing. And then he realized social media itself and the effects on the kids is like this major problem, this epidemic that we have. And so he basically debunks all of the concerns that anyone has had and shows it with data and breaks it down. And, us having young kids, I should say a young daughter with, one on the way. I think what has happened is basically social media came out and no one really understood the ramifications from it. And so, in this book, he talks about how pretty much we had this fear of letting our kids go out into the real world, but then we gave them this fake digital world and we didn't protect them. And really we're seeing this generation come through that has, in other words, just like damage, emotional damage, anxiety damage. Like there's some damage that has come from it because the proper guardrails weren't put in place.
But there are almost too many guardrails when it comes to physical parenting. You know, like when we were just talking about this in the car, when we were growing up, we're both millennials. And, you know, I was walking home from school at 8. I think we just saw something on the news about a parent getting arrested because their 10-year-old was out by
10-year-old
themselves.
walked like a quarter of a mile to a store and someone called the cops on her.
Yeah. So we have these guardrails with physical, you know, don't walk alone, don't bike alone, don't go out on your own in the neighborhood like you used to be able to. I sound like when I was a kid, I used to walk 10 miles to school in the snow. But then we give a kid a computer in their hand and have all of a sudden adults can have access to them if they're on certain social media platforms, and there's no guardrails there. That's dangerous. Where does the danger lie?
And the danger, I think there's danger in so many levels of it that you don't even think about. Like the danger of a front-facing camera. I mean, that's a piece of technology that we're not used to.
So it's not just other people that's dangerous.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There's so many levels. There's the idea of the filters. There's the idea of the measuring. I mean, one of the things why we also don't want to post our daughter on social media is like, you know, over the years, she's going to measure her current life to this filtered, glamorous, edited previous life. And it's never going to match up. And that's what happens with a lot of things on social media now is that people filter everything. It looks like this perfect world. And then people who are watching social media inevitably compare themselves to that and think, well, I'm not going to match up to that. And so there's this dilemma, this battle that's in our mind that we have to realize, like, you have to protect yourself as an adult, and also you have to protect your children, because if they're always seeing this world that's not attainable, they're going to feel they're just not going to have the self-confidence that they should have.
Yeah, it could impact her that way. And I think, this is a topic it creates ethical dilemmas. There's legal ramifications to it as well. There's countries and states that are starting to dig into this because it's such a new world in terms of social media and putting your child on social media. And I think the closest industry that we can look to is probably the acting industry and like the stage moms and all of that. And there are laws in place in certain places like California, where entertainment is king, to make sure that children that are acting and are on screen are being paid appropriately. Because think about it. If there's a minor, you need parental consent. The parent is managing the money. The parent is managing the child. Where is the money going? Well, it's supposed to go to the child, right? The child is making the money. Yeah. But that doesn't always happen, right? And so because of history, because of many times when parents unfortunately took advantage of their children, California put a law into place to protect that money that children are making, child actors. So I think you're going to see a lot of that happening around the states.
Illinois recently passed one about kids being in content online, and there's some very detailed lines about, you know, if it's earning money, you know, how much money, how much they're supposed to be paid, how much if they're in it for a certain amount of time. And and just, you know, to be transparent, like we have paid our daughter for jobs that she has been in.
Yeah, if she's on screen, then she's getting paid.
Yeah, so there have been jobs that clearly she was a part of, and she gets a paycheck from that.
Right.
And there was a hire, basically she was an actor. You know, there was the job for Slumber Pod that she was in a commercial.
Which is an awesome tool if you're a parent.
That's right.
Awesome travel tool. It's a little blackout tent that goes over your pack and play. Awesome.
So she was in that. She's had some paid things. And just to dive a little bit into the details, right now we actually invest all of her money in a Roth IRA. And reason being is that she can take out the now I'm confused. It's either the principal. She can take out the principal, but the earnings have to stay after 5 years. So when she's 18, she'll have a chunk of money that she can do something with, and she'll also have an investment already started.
Yes.
So that's kind of the recommended, if you are going down this path, what a lot of people recommend tax-wise, it's the best thing to do.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think you also see with social media, there's certain laws that people want enacted, and then you have the social media companies that maybe don't want them enacted, like an age limit. because that would take away a huge user base. And if you don't have as big of a user base, you're not worth as much money.
Well, it's this
tricky.
It's kind of a race to the first use, basically. So let's say Facebook limits the age to and actually enforces it. That's the problem. Sometimes they have.
Yeah. You could say 13, but how many times are people going to pretend they're a certain age?
And I think that's actually part of the law. They have a law that says, oh, they're supposed to be 13, but there's nothing to say they have to enforce it.
Right.
And so let's say Facebook comes out and says, we're going to enforce it. You have to be 15 before you can use our platform. Well, if TikTok isn't enforcing it, then all the kids are going to run to TikTok. And now once they build their relationships and they build their digital community on there, they're not going to jump to Facebook. So now Facebook's not going to be worth anything. So Facebook's just going to lower their age limit so they can get the first people. So that's why these social media companies go after the kids at such a young age, because it's financially an incentive to keep them on there and keep them on the platform. So it's some nefarious reasons, really.
And I think as a parent, it's like I'm always like, what's the action item? What can we do? And what we learned in The Anxious Generation, that book by Jonathan Haidt, is to create a little community with, other parents, have conversations, I know in our town, there is an open conversation about like a low tech alliance, they call it, which I think is really wonderful. But having those open communication, lines of communication with your daughter or son's friends' parents, so that all of the kids have the same access to social media, phones, etc. Because kids are smart. They're just going to go to their friend's house that has access. If our daughter doesn't mean that she's not going to have access at someone else's house. They get together and sure, that's socializing, but maybe not in the healthiest way.
And so there's a few things. It'd be one thing if she goes over to her friend's house and the two of them are like snooping around on Instagram. Not the best thing, but from a relationship and developmental side, they're doing something together. So there's that piece. So it's not ideal, but it's much better than her sitting in her room just scrolling alone. Yeah. We've kind of taken the philosophy right now, and obviously we're not in the heart of it, the meat of it. She's only 2.5. Wait till she's 8, 9, 10, and that pressure from society is going to get tough. So I say that now. Ask me in a few years, and we'll see how we stand. But right now, the idea is that if she has a screen, it's a dumb screen, meaning that we put the the guided access on her iPhone. Like if we're traveling or we're out at dinner, it's like, hey, let's just have a meal so you can watch something. We don't let her just tap away. Reason being is that she doesn't need to. She doesn't need, the kids are going to learn a screen very quickly, and they're getting that immediate feedback. And it's basically the idea of you need to have forced frustrations on these kids. We live in a society where everything's just so easy and immediate that you kind of need to make things uncomfortable. They need to be bored. Mm-hmm. And they don't need to be playing playing games at this point, because it's too easy for them to get that super short attention span.
Yeah, I know they're Gen Alpha, but it's like they're Gen Dopamine. They're constantly getting this dopamine hit when they're clicking, and they learn it so quickly, like you said, but that is not necessary.
No.
It really isn't. And I find that, listen, we use screens as a tool, especially when we travel. We'll bring out an iPad. There's no internet connection to it. There's just movies that we've downloaded on.
And we lock the screen.
And we lock the screen so she can't just roam around. We're very intentional with that. I'm not going to shame someone for using a screen. That's just not my vibe. I think they can be utilized. And
she'll figure it out. She's already trying to figure out some things, but for right now, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to keep it dumb and simple. Yes. And the other thing too is kids will push you, and she's already oh, I don't like you. She'll put a movie on for 15 minutes. I want a different one. And it's no, you chose that. This philosophy I kind of take from Angela Duckworth's Grit book, where, hers was the idea of with kids in sports, but I take this as a simple thing with movies. And the idea is if it was kind of how do you build grit within kids? And one of the things they talked about is if a kid wants to do a sport, they don't need to sign up for life, but they do need some commitment. So if it's, all right, you're going to do soccer, well, we're doing this season, and then after that, we can stop. If you get out there and you find out oh, I don't really like it, it's that's fine, but you're going to finish this season, and then after that, we'll figure it out. And I
Teaching
take
commitment.
teaching commitment. And the same thing with like these videos. You know, if we're on the airplane, she's like, I don't like this. I'm like, you chose Princess and the Frog. You can finish it, or I can just turn it off. We can read a book. And right away she's like, no, okay, fine. I'll watch this. And so it is, you're right. Teaching commitment. It's a good way to put it.
Yeah, that's what it is. And another topic that came up in Jonathan Haidt's book, and we've talked about it as well, is having a community computer, like a family computer in like the kitchen or somewhere where everybody is highly trafficked, like it's a highly trafficked area of the house. And that's when she's older. You know, she doesn't obviously need that now, but that's the goal for later on.
We'll see. It's
Right.
I think it's just educating ourselves, and it's knowing we're not going to make the right decision 100% of the time.
Yeah.
And we're not going to be able to keep her offline forever, but it's protecting, you know, in the book, Anxious Generation, he's all about protecting the developmental years, you know, so it's, you know, roughly up to about 13. And he's like, you need to keep the kids off where their brains are still developing. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the main idea is like, let's keep her off that instant feedback, that social pressure that she doesn't need to have. You know, we all need to be a big fish in a small pond, you know, at some point in our lives. It's like, you need to make the high school football team or track team, and you don't need to be competing with the entire world. And when you step online, you're automatically competing with the entire world, and you're just going to see the absolute best. And it's like, you're not going to see that person
and
around
the worst.
and the worst too.
Yeah.
So it's a tricky thing, and hopefully we'll be able to navigate it as we continue to go forward.
Well, I think we have to keep educating ourselves and adapting, because there's going to be a new social media platform tomorrow probably, and we're going to have to learn how to adapt. And then the kids learn so quickly that they're going to outsmart us with everything that we think of. So I think it's having that open communication with her as well over time, but it's just like a constant.
And Jonathan Haidt, he talks in the book too. It's like, while, you know, a lot of parents are like, oh, they don't have a phone, but they have an iPad. Mm-hmm. It's so easy for us to do that. Oh, that's their iPad. And you very quickly like lose the control of it and let them play with it. Well, that iPad's going to be connected online, and all of a sudden they're going to figure out to snoop around websites and whatnot, maybe get on social media. And so it's just knowing, like, I mean, it's kind of a practice that I try to drive, but I'm the worst. Is like, I try to keep the screens out of the bedroom, and like, because it's so easy for us to just pick it up and scroll. If I don't want to do it, then I really don't think they should be doing it either.
Right. And if it's so hard for us as adults who our brains are developed and we understand the consequences, if it's so hard for us to put the darn phone down, what's it like for a child with, you know, no impulse control?
Right.
You know, it's still developing. We have to teach it. I don't blame them for being addicted to their phones. If given the opportunity and the chance to have a phone, of course they're going to be glued to it. Like, that's the whole point.
It's such, even if, I mean, there's been so many times, and we've talked about it a lot, how we go to bed, we quote, go to bed, and then an hour later, we're still on our phones doing nothing.
And we're like, what are we doing?
What are we doing? And I have literally said to myself, what am I doing? I need to put this down. Or I've even said to myself, okay, I'm going to put the phone down. I'm going to pick up a book and just going to read and then go to bed. And then I always convince myself, I'm just going to, and I'll do little things like, I'm not going to look at social media. I just want to look at a picture of Scotland real quick. And then that slippery slope, or I need to check my email. Not at 11 o'clock. I don't need to check my email.
It's addictive.
It's addictive.
It really is.
And so I would love to get it out of the room and like charge it outside. Unfortunately, there's just too many apps that we use. Like right now, it's our nanny cam.
Nanit.
Nanit. So it's like, oh, I use that. And as I say it, I could always have a solution. I could use the iPad and plug that in and figure it out. But just
we could
take the steps. I could do that. Yeah.
Take a page out of our own book.
Yeah. Yeah. So Colette and I actually have tried. We've had some inspiration from our friends who are much better with not using their phones.
Yeah.
And just try to think of every reason you might need it. You know, for example, what we found was like, oh, I need it for a clock. I don't know the time. So we're like, all right, well, let's get a few clocks, put it around the house. Mm-hmm. The idea of like, oh, I need it when we go to the park. It's like, do you really? Like, well, I need to take pictures.
Bring a camera.
And you'll find out, like, I always challenge the idea, and I've talked about this before. It's like, when you take a picture with your phone, like sometimes I challenge, why are you taking that picture? There's the ones where you're like, we're having a moment. I want to get this picture with my friends and family, whatever it might be, just to have it. Yes, those obviously take those pictures. But for example, like, taking Scotland to the park and she's on the swing and I take a picture and I'll find myself like sending it to Colette or sending it to family. And it's like, wait a second, why am I doing that? Like, do I really need to do that? Like, yes, I would like to.
Again, you're proud. It's probably like why we posted her on social.
Exactly. Yeah. But then I dive into it. I'm like, because I'm trying to get that response back.
Yeah.
Like there's a dopamine connection to, I send it to you, even if it's small, you like it. Okay. There's a little feedback of, I got a response.
Feedback loop. Yeah.
Feedback loop. Whereas like, if I didn't bring the phone and I just took that picture with the camera, would I really go edit those photos or upload them to my computer? Maybe, maybe not.
These are all very deep thoughts.
Yeah.
And they're really important because they impact us on a small scale and a large scale. And it will for our entire lifespan.
And it feels, sometimes when you think about the idea of like putting your phone down, it feels scary. It feels scary and it feels like boring. Right?
Yeah.
Like if I was like, you got to put your phone down for the rest of the day.
I'd be like, no, can you give me a heads up next time?
Oh.
Probably. Like I got things to do.
What do you have to do on your phone?
Check my email incessantly.
Okay. You can check on your laptop, right?
I guess I could. There's nothing I need to do. You're right.
I like this. You're like,
You're right. See, it makes me uncomfortable. I'm like,
makes you uncomfortable.
but I want to.
I think,
It's so natural to pick up my phone and what updates?
and I believe it's all tied to the dopamine brain. I think it's that itch.
Dopamine nation, baby.
Because it's like, as soon as you put the phone down, you can put it down for a few minutes, but that itch is going to start coming. And you kind of have to get past that hump. And you have to create a barrier to get past it. And really, it's all about, like, if you think about drugs, like if drugs of any nature, alcohol, cocaine, like weed, like all that stuff, if you're really jonesing for it, there's usually like a drive to go get it. And but there's barriers to stop you from doing it. You know, it's illegal. It costs money. Societal pressures, like, or, when it comes to drinking, like, or actually any drugs, like the negative effects of a hangover, like there's these barriers to do it. Whereas the phone, it's just like, what's the negative effects? Society allows you to have it, unless you start to look at, like, you realize, like, oh, there's negative effects of, like, I'm not playing with my daughter. I'm not interacting. Like, if you can put those as negative effects in your brain,
right.
but it's easy for us to just be like, no, whatever, it's fine.
Yeah. It's easy to make an excuse, basically.
To make excuses.
Of why it's fine, because you want it to be fine.
And I'm guilty of it.
I know.
I'm so guilty of it.
We're all guilty of it. It's tough. It's really hard.
And I can remember a few years ago, I lost my phone riding snowmobiles with my buddy Andrew. Lost it in, like, I don't know, it was like 6 feet of backcountry. I'm still hoping one day someone is like, because I put an alert on it, so it would say, like, my phone number's this, I lost it this date. If that phone ever gets found, but it's probably been ruined and buried in dirt and stuff.
Bigfoot has it now.
Yeah. Hey, this is Bigfoot. I got your phone. But I didn't have a phone for like 3 or 4 days, and I traveled without a phone.
Yes, and that's weird because you usually have your boarding pass.
I had to have
phone.
a paper boarding pass.
Like, who's this old man?
I had to, like, go to a taxi.
Wow.
Yeah.
How we used to travel.
I had
in
to
the olden
plan,
days.
like, I'm going to be out here at this time. Like, I'll see you when I get there.
Yeah, you called me from a friend's phone to be like, hey, I lost my phone. So if you need me, I am accessible this way.
But you know what? I survived.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I bet you thrived, honestly.
Yeah. Which,
after you got over the initial sadness of losing a $1,000 device.
but even so, when it comes to, like, kids, like, now we're going to be like, we need to keep tabs on her.
Yes.
And we're going to have to relinquish that, not have full control. Look on your face.
What do you mean?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's going to be tricky.
It is. I'm going to have to take a few notes from my friends that live overseas that are a little bit more relaxed about all this.
And hopefully not get the cops called on you when you allow her
That's
to go
true.
to.
I mean, I need to bring up another story about that because they're in Denmark. Moms leave and dads leave their babies outside to nap because they think they sleep better that way. So they bundle them up. They leave their babies outside in their strollers. And so if you go to a cafe or, anywhere in Denmark, you'll just see like lines of babies outside of places on the street. Never harmed. This is just a standard cultural practice. So a mother goes from Denmark, I believe it was Denmark, to New York and does the same thing. And she got arrested.
She actually got arrested?
Yeah.
Was she in New York City?
She was, yeah. I mean, I
don't know if I do in New York City.
In New York City, but
it's hard. I mean, but we say that.
But they say it's normal, and I say, we say it with judgment of like our filter of as being Americans. But that's just goes to show you how there's just different ways of parenting in different parts of the world, and we'll figure it out.
I forgot. I was actually going to share one thing, which is going to sound so odd considering we make our living online, which is what I recommend to everyone. I don't think anyone should have social media on their phone. And I've gone through wave after wave of deleting it. And, I'll delete all. I don't. So basically I tell people, you don't need social media on your phone. If you're like, I have to check it, you can check all social media on your computer. It's not as engaging, like it's not as addictive to go pick up your computer. It's also just, there's this social barrier. You're not going to sit on the couch or at a dinner table and like pick up your laptop.
Right.
You're going to, I don't need to do that right now. But you'd pick up your phone and look under the table and be like, let me check these little reminders.
You'd be a social pariah if you did that.
Yeah. And turn off all alerts on your phone.
Yes. I don't have alerts.
I pretty much live 100% on do not disturb, which leads to quite a few phone calls getting missed from if you're not in my contacts. But yeah, I just think you don't need to carry that around. And it's a recommendation I tell everyone. And I'm not perfect, but I go through phases of downloading something because I need to upload something. And then all of a sudden I'm like, man, I've had a pretty bad trend of picking my phone up. I need to put it down again.
Yeah.
Maybe after this, we can put our phones down for the rest of the day.
Wild idea.
I can see Colette just itching.
I need like an iPod or something again.
That's the thing. We need music. Yeah. Well, once we get the smart speakers set up, then we can hopefully control.
I know there's a solution to all these problems I keep bringing up.
There is.
It's just that this is the easy way.
Yeah.
And I'm used to it.
It's so easy. And that's what was the whole point. Thanks a lot, Steve Jobs.
Well, thanks for listening. And if you guys have any tips, or I want to know what other people are doing.
Yeah.
How are you managing social media for your kids and just electronics in general? We're curious. So write in.
Maybe we'll just turn Amish.
Oh boy.
No electricity.
Yeah, I don't know if we'll go that far.
All right. Well, thanks so much, everyone.
All right. Thanks. See you next time.
Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you're learning from and or enjoying this podcast, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Instagram and TikTok. These are great free ways to support this podcast. Also, please subscribe to this podcast on both Spotify and Apple. On both of those platforms, you can leave us up to a 5-star review, which would help us out greatly. Please also check out the sponsors mentioned in today's episode. That's the best way to support this show. If you have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover, please put those in the comment sections in YouTube. And yes, we do read all the comments.